Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 629 for the 1st of November 2020. Richard Saunders coming to you from Sydney, Australia. The beginning of a new month, and a new month means, sadly, for some people around the world going back into lockdown. And I'm certainly thinking about my friends and colleagues in those parts of the world which aren't having such a great November, or will shortly not have such a great November. Hopefully, skeptical podcasts like the Skeptic Zone can help you get through. This week on the show, we continue our tributes to James Randi, who died only a week or so ago, starting with a series of interviews I conducted with Randi over the years. Starting in 2007, an interview I did with him on the amazing adventure, the amazing cruise north to Alaska. Now, originally, when I was doing the production, I thought that the amazing cruise interview was the first time I had actually interviewed James Randi. But after going through archives when the section was finished being produced, I discovered an earlier interview from 2006. And what I've done is I've put that earlier interview on YouTube, on the Skeptic Zone YouTube channel. If you don't subscribe to the Skeptic Zone YouTube channel, it's another way to listen to the show and other videos. Anyway, I will link directly to that original, what I believe is the very first interview from 2006, in this week's show notes. But yes, a series of interviews spanning the years of the Skeptic Zone with James Randi. Following that, we go once again back into the treasure trove that is Trove and other resources. So we look specifically at the year 1980 and find newspaper references to James Randi, more or less focusing on his water divining exploits in this country, or the tests, I should say, a little bit about his Don Lane fiasco when Don Lane kicked him off the show. And some of these clippings and stories come from my own personal research in the State Library of New South Wales over the years, where I've gone through microfilm and found references and clippings about James Randi. But before we get stuck into the show, my hearty congratulations to Dr. Paulie and the whole team at the Gold Coast Skeptics, who put on a fantastic online Skepticon 2020, the Australian Skeptics National Convention. I sat there last weekend, had a wonderful time listening and watching the talks, interacting with other people, asking questions, and afterwards going into little rooms to chat to friends, just like the old days. A first-class effort and a wonderful convention, so once again, congratulations to the Gold Coast team. But now it's time for me to run downstairs, grab a coffee, have a look in the back garden, because we've had a lot of rain lately. And I guess you know what I'm talking about. When you've had a lot of rain, the grass really grows long. Time to get out the whippersnipper? Well, I do that. I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. James Randi appeared many times on the Skeptic Zone podcast since its beginnings in 2008, and what I'd like to play you now is a selection of those appearances over the years. But we're going to start with the very first time I interviewed James Randi, which was way back in 2007 during the amazing cruise north to Alaska. We're on the amazing adventure 2 up the coast of Alaska, and here having breakfast with Mr. James Randi.
The ship has been rolling like crazy during the night, and it's it is not quite ceased, but it's down to a reasonable roll right now. And we've got hysterics in the background, as you can hear. But
They just got your joke from last night.
Yeah, there you go. I'm having a wonderful time. It's very stimulating to be with such good friends and fans here. And I like the little curtsies that people give when I pass by, and that sort of
standing
thing.
to attention.
Yes, and I give them a quick blessing as I pass. No, it's really fun, Richard, to be here with folks like you who have come some distance to be here. And that's very flattering indeed. And I have not seen this part of the world before, and certainly not from this particular vantage point. So I'm having a very good time. I'm highly entertained, and I hope that along the way I might provide some of the entertainment.
I think that a situation like this, even though we're on a large vessel, it's much like your amazing meetings. It's simply a great opportunity to make new friends, to network, like any social organization, I guess.
Well, we launched this cruise, as we have with others and with the amazing meetings and such, for purposes of funding the JREF. That's very obvious, and we've never concealed the facts about it. But on this particular venture, we won't make very much money. But that's not the only purpose of it. The purpose of interacting with friends of like mind. And I've done a great deal of that in just the last couple of days, and we're barely started on this venture. It's been most rewarding in that respect. It's touching the flesh and making sure that the people have met eye to eye. And as I made my little speech at the very beginning, when we first boarded here, I want people to come over and make sure that I shake their hand, I look them straight in the eye, and what questions have we got? And people have followed me up on that invitation, and they've cornered me. I'm very gladly and happily cornered, I must say. I have no objection to it. In fact, I encourage it. So it's been wonderful. It's just been wonderful. A good experience.
At the very first recording of the Skeptic Zone, the very first session, and that was in Atlanta, Georgia, my guest on stage was none other than James Randi. Mr. Randi, you did an excellent series in the UK about 1991, James Randi, Psychic
I spent that money already, though.
And in the audience were, in fact, Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry.
Yes, they showed up, and they snuck in and sat in the front row so the people behind them couldn't see their faces, didn't know who they were, and they had a reading done for them. Talk about a fiasco. It was a total fiasco with a capital F. And that's a dirty laugh. I'll bottle that and take it with me.
Now we move to episode number 116 in January 2011, and it's Maynard's turn to interview James Randi.
Well, I'm here at TAM Australia, and there's a guy with a really unusual name. Amazing. That is a great first name, Mr. Randi.
Yes, so I've been told. Many people refer to, in conversations, they refer to some amazing event, and I always interrupt them and say, no, that's not amazing. It's astonishing. I'm amazing, you see.
And how did you get that one as a magician? Because there's lots of names you could have got, incredible, wacky, kooky, that guy over there. Why amazing?
Well, there's the insufficient. That was one that I passed up. And the
disdainful, that's a good one.
Yeah, and the clumsy, and a few things like that. But I finally settled on amazing. As a matter of fact, that's interesting because when I first entered the conjuring profession, as I prefer to refer to it, I was given all kinds of choices. There were professors, this and the great, and so-and-so, but I didn't know of any amazings. And so I decided to adopt amazing.
In April 2011, on episode number 128, I catch up with James Randi and speak to him about his recent trip to Norway. And joining me now live all the way from Fort Lauderdale in Florida, it's none other than the amazing Randi himself. Hello, Randi.
How exciting this must be for you.
It is. I'm thrilled to death. And imagine you're being interviewed for a podcast. That must be something big.
Yes, brand new. I've never done this before, of course.
Now, I've been quite interested to see lately, following your adventures all the way to Norway, Randi, somewhere I've never been and somewhere I'd love to visit. Can you tell me some of your experiences in Norway and why did you go so far?
Well, I've been all over Scandinavia several times over the past 20 years or so and enjoyed it every single time, even in the dead of winter. I had rather nasty weather in Norway, I must say, but that's not their fault, of course. They didn't wish it on me. Well, on the other hand, maybe that did work if somebody wished it on me, so I'm not too sure of that. But I suffered through all that and had the benefit of their great hospitality. We had sold-out crowds every show, and it was rather sad. We had to turn away, are you ready? Almost 1,500 people on the first show in Oslo. That's a lot of people to turn away. And I was very, very disappointed to know that we had to do that. But on the other hand, it was streamed live, and at least 1,000 people were tuned in on the web to hear it. And they were very happy with the results, I believe. And we had lots and lots of newspaper space. Now, I was invited specifically by the Norwegian Humanist Association. I'm surprised and very, very pleased, Richard, I must say, to have discovered when I got there that the humanist organization, the whole humanist philosophy, is really very strong and pervasive in Norway. And they sort of need it. I'm sure you've heard of the Royal House of Norway and their eccentricities.
Well, what royal house doesn't have eccentricities?
Well, that's very true. Very true. You don't have one in Australia that I know of, except it may be that remote one in, what's the call? Oh, yes, the UK.
Yes, that's the one, yes.
I see. Well, you still have the lady's picture on your coinage and on your bills and such. So
we do.
Yes, I see. Well, in Canada they still do, I'm told, as well. But they're preferring beavers. The beavers are much more attractive, I'm told. No, it's quite interesting because Princess Martha Louise there, she is, I'm going to try to put it kindly, she's a nutcase. And everybody in Norway that I met, now mind you, I was meeting mostly humanists, but in the immediate crowd, but the press, all the media and such kept on saying, oh, we're so embarrassed over the royal family, because she really is giving lessons. Literally, a princess of Norway is giving lessons to people, to citizens out there, for money, to teach them how to contact their guardian angels. Now, I, too, can speak to guardian angels. I can speak to lampposts. I can speak to anything you want, but whether I get an answer, of course, is the rather important question here. And we challenged the princess on television. She didn't appear with me, of course. She was royalty, you see, and is royalty, pardon me. Still is, from what I've heard, although that position may be in jeopardy. I'm not too sure. But she just really said that we do not answer to such inquiries. This is the royal we, of course. And,
that one. That's a great excuse, and I've heard John Edward say the same thing.
Yes.
He said, what do you say to the skeptics, Mr. Edward? Oh, I don't respond to skeptics. Wow, that's the best out you could possibly have, I think.
Well, you may know that we specifically challenged John Edward to take the $1 million prize, and his press agent, not he himself. We weren't given that great favor. His press agent answered and said, "Dear sir," date at the top, then, "Dear sir, Mr. Edward does not respond to criticism. Yours truly." And then he signed it. Now, that's great, isn't it? I'm going to appear before the magistrates. I don't recognize this court. Goodbye, and walk out. Sure, that's going to work.
Following on from that, on episode 129, I continue my talk with James Randi. But now I'd like to change the topic a little bit, and talk briefly about the $1 million prize from the James Randi Educational Foundation. And the angle I'd like to put to you is, we all know it's there. Of course it's there. It's you've gone to great pains to show to anybody who cares to look into it that the prize is really there. Yet there are still people who will not take your prize with the ridiculous excuse is that, oh, the money's not there and James Randi's lying all the time. You must get an awful lot of that.
Oh, yes, I do. As a matter of fact, the facts of the matter are that years ago we advertised that if they wanted proof of it, that we would send them a notarized document. It's an attested, warranted document that is a legal document, and if I were to make a misstatement on that sort of thing, they could sue me, and they could certainly win in any court of law here in America. So I offered to send them a copy of that form, and as we got from the investment house, which was Goldman Sachs in those days, no longer is now, we changed. I used to, every month when it came in, I would make a photocopy of it and prepare 5 or 6 photocopies and put them in a drawer here in the other office and be prepared to mail them out. Now, the fact of the matter, Richard, is that in all those years we have been offering this evidence, not one person, believer or non-believer, has ever asked to see that evidence. And yet they continue to say, the money isn't there. No, it's all a fake. James Randi is a magician. He's a liar, and it's not there. But it's open for examination. The notarized document, as I say, is a legal document. It's a binding document. And we certainly could be successfully sued if we made a statement like that saying the $1 million is there and it wasn't there for that purpose. And it is reserved. As a matter of fact, the account is called the James Randi Educational Foundation Prize Account, and it's specifically for that purpose. At the moment, it's about $1.3 million, and we'll take some off the top of it in order to help run the foundation. It'll always be a minimum of $1 million. Not one person has ever asked to see that evidence. Not by fax, not by personal visit, not by mail, not by email. No one has ever asked to see it. And that's astonishing, isn't it?
Now we skip forward to episode number 176 in 2012. And don't forget, folks, you can go to the full interviews with James Randi. These are all just little snippets, little excerpts. If you go to the episodes I mentioned at skepticzone.tv and click the episode link. So, yes, this is episode number 176. Well, Randi, it's what a year it's looking to be for the James Randi Educational Foundation. It's hard to believe it, but it's true. TAM number 10, the amazing meeting number 10, coming up in July 12th to the 15th in Las Vegas. 10 years of TAM, Randi.
Wow, hard to believe. And to think that at the very first TAM that we had 88 people. And last year we had 1,652, I think it was. And yes, it's incredible, really. That's an exponential curve, Richard, and I think we're on the very steep side of the curve right now.
I think so. I think before long you're going to have to build your own hotel to house all the people who want to come to the amazing meeting. And the reason so many people come to the amazing meeting, well, you couldn't put your finger on one reason, of course, but for me it's just the caliber of speakers. It's days and days of being enthralled with the top scientists in the world, the top magicians, the top thinkers. It must be some big undertaking to get that caliber of speakers to come along.
Well, frankly, we just have to mumble an invitation, and people are clamoring to get at us. I must say, we've had Richard Dawkins and Neil Degrasse Tyson just recently. Do you know Neil Degrasse Tyson at all? Do you know that name?
Yeah, indeed, and I've had the pleasure of, in fact, the last TAM 9, which was called TAM 9 from Outer Space, I had the pleasure of interviewing Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Oh, yes, of course you did. Yes, I'd forgotten that. But he's a charming gentleman, and by golly, he has just been such an attraction. Well, he and Richard, can you imagine any conference that has Richard Dawkins and Neil deGrasse Tyson at the same event? I mean, we felt that if we invited one more really sterling person, we might reach critical mass and go up and boom, you know.
Episode 196 in July 2012, and Maynard interviews James Randi at the amazing meeting in Las Vegas.
Well, look, here's a guy I spoke to last time at TAM Australia, the amazing, incredible guy with the beard. Randi, how are you?
I'm doing very well for an old fellow of 83.
Yeah, look, you're the same age as my dad, and my dad loves going to the doctor all the time. I think you've probably had enough of doctors for the time being, haven't you?
Well, yes, I have had a few experiences in that direction, such as, colon cancer, chemotherapy for 6 months, and a few things like that, and a double heart attack and a double bypass.
Double heart attack?
A double heart, yes. I don't fool around. I do things thoroughly when I do them.
But you seem to have so much energy. Is that why you had the double heart attack? You're pushing yourself a bit hard?
This is entirely an act.
Now, looking back, how was TAM Australia while you were there? I spoke to you pretty much at the beginning of it.
Well, I tell you, I say this with great sincerity. Any time that I can get to Australia, I say it correctly, you see, to Australia, I do so. Because, Dick Smith is a good friend of mine, and so is Phil Adams, and Richard Saunders, of course, and so many folks over there, that are good, solid friends of mine. I delight in seeing them again, and I just love the country. It's a new country. It's like the United States was, half a century or maybe more ago, and I almost feel that I want to go back to that, and I like to visit Australia for that very reason.
Now we come to episode 220 from January 2013, and once again, Maynard is with James Randi.
It's December in Melbourne, and every December in Melbourne, it rains James Randi. You can't go anywhere without tripping over one, and over the past couple of days, that's what's been happening. James Randi, how are you?
Very well, thank you, and I'm having a marvelous time. I'm meeting such interesting folks and, groups of people and individuals. Melbourne is a revelation. It really is.
Now, when were you last here?
I hate to tell you, but I think it was in 1981. That's when I confronted Don Lane. And I think that's the last time I was in Melbourne, though I find that hard to believe. I do so much traveling. It's all a melange in my poor old head. But
Because how old are you now, sir?
I'm 84 all day. And I always say 84 going on 100 because I'm an optimist.
Now, James, I was thinking about you at about 3:30 this morning because there were some bogans in the hotel room next door to me that woke me up. And I thought, now when I'm asking James, Mr. Randi, something, because people go, oh, yes, he's part of Big Pharma, he's on the government side with disinformation. I thought, hang on a minute, let's turn that around. You are someone who is into rationalism. You're someone who has a lifestyle that maybe 3 different successive presidents might not have supported. How come you haven't made so many enemies that you're on the receiving end of some conspiracies?
Oh, I just may very well be, but, at 84, you sort of mellow. I think I should have mellowed 20 years ago, but I'm mellowing now, and I take these things in turn, and I've learned to ignore a great deal of flack from my detractors out there, and I'm sure they are legion, as they say. It doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah, I guess you just get to a certain point and you go, eh.
Yeah, is exactly right. I don't know how you spell that, but that's exactly what it is, yes.
And has the term woo-woo got to where you want it to be yet? That means, I always use just woo because woo-woo sounds a bit like a train or something, but you want to get woo-woo into the dictionary.
I would love to get woo at least into the American dictionary, and I want to make sure it's a hyphenated woo, and that would just be a sort of an accomplishment for me. It'd be one of the things I haven't done yet, so I guess I better hurry up and do it.
Episode 299 now from July 2014, and once again I bump into James Randi at the amazing meeting.
Loser again. Drat. Yeah. Well, back to the old drawing board.
Back to the old drawing board. Are you enjoying the TAM? I would suggest you are. You always enjoy TAM, Mr. Randi.
Oh, I have a ball at this place. And I'm also really rather struck by the fact that I can attract people, in this case, from 23 countries across the world.
Yes, they read them all out the other day. It's remarkable.
But I've got to face the fact that it's not me, it's the organization, it's the JRF itself, and the good work that it does around the world that they're really interested in, and I just happen to be the figurehead. So I take full advantage of that.
You do. You do. And it's remarkable that I've actually caught you. It's a bit quiet out here in the hallway. There's a talk going on inside. But it's remarkable. I can actually pull you away from the people.
Yes.
And you can't help yourself. I saw you performing some wonderful conjuring tricks earlier.
Oh, yes, conjuring tricks. That's what we call them. Actually, they're miracles of a semi-religious nature. That's the way I
You just won't
define
let
them.
on about that. That's
Yes.
right. And it's nice to see you so mobile, because a couple of times ago you were somewhat confined to a wheelchair.
Yes, incapacitated. I had
But you're doing
aneurysms.
much better now.
I had aneurysms that had really crippled me, and I was in a wheelchair. But I had an operation since, very serious one, as a matter of fact, and it almost did me in, but medical science did the job again.
That's happened quite a lot recently. Things
It has.
Medical things almost doing you in,
Yeah.
but not quite, not yet.
Well, colon cancer and a few other things. I had a heart bypass,
What's next on the list?
I've got no parts left. Or the parts that I have left, I trust will not go out of circulation.
I certainly hope
Let's not get into details.
Let's not get into details. Well, I hope you enjoyed the rest of the amazing
yes.
meeting,
Oh,
and
yes.
then we can start counting the days till the next amazing meeting.
Oh, indeed, and I'll be in Australia.
Later this year, you will be in Australia,
Yes,
yes.
I will indeed.
Yeah, we'll post more details about that soon.
I'm soon. I'll be all right. Keep your seats. I'm sure you will.
Thank you.
December 2014, episode number 320, and what a special time that was for me personally when I was on tour with James Randi around Australia, Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, Perth and Adelaide. I found some time in Adelaide to have a chat with James Randi.
What are we doing here, Richard?
We're, Randy, I wish I knew. We've found ourselves now in the city of Adelaide. This is the first city on the big tour, the Evening with James Randi tour. It's a wonderful city, and last night, I think the tour got off to a good start.
Oh, yes. No, I think we did okay. We amateurs.
Yes.
You're not accustomed to public speaking.
Not
of
at
course.
all, no.
And I have never done it,
No,
of course.
you not too. Oh
No,
no,
I've never done it in my life. I'm frightened of it.
I think we winged it pretty well then.
Oh, yeah.
We did, and it was a very enjoyable evening. Of course, the audience saw the documentary, The Honest Liar, followed by a brief break, and then you and I chatting on stage for an hour, which was most enjoyable.
Yeah, are you sure? Because some people, I think they died in the audience, and that's why they weren't moving much when the other people moved out. But no, I think we did very well. Seriously, Richard, we did very well, and it may be a beautiful friendship from now on.
That's right. Well, I first met you in the year 2000. You were out here for a big skeptical convention in Sydney.
Yes.
But your reputation preceded you, of course. But I remember that quite fondly because you were very proudly showing me your latest digital camera. And I was very proudly showing you my latest movie digital camera, which was big at the time.
Yes, you were always trying to up me one.
I am.
You know.
I still am, I think.
Yeah, yes, I see. Not too successfully.
No,
though,
no. But one of my fondest memories of that time was that it was the first time I saw the card trick known as Out of This World.
Oh, yes.
And you performed that on the boat cruise we had, and I honestly thought that could not happen, what I just saw before my eyes. And I subsequently learned the trick, but the first time you see that particular trick, you cannot fathom how that's possible.
Oh, yeah. No, Out of This World was, what was his name? And that I can't think of the man's name. I never met him, but it was something in the 1930s or so. He invented it, and he's in the magic profession, the conjuring profession, pardon me. He's widely known for that. And there are about 3 or 4 different versions of it.
Yes.
But the one that we both do, I think, is the better one.
It's one of those tricks which has the particular punch in it where the participant is the person who is doing the trick.
Yes,
Isn't
entirely.
it? Yeah,
This is entirely in your control. You dealt it exactly the way you wanted to.
Yes.
I didn't interfere.
Yeah.
No. And when they turn the cards over, it just floors them.
Well, it floors them. And the first time I saw it, and I'm sure it's the case, is the first time the audience see it, I was floored. I was absolutely gobsmacked.
And you're not easily floored.
Not easily.
No, not easily. No.
Not easily. In that occasion, I was. And it gets back to what we chatted about last night on stage, is your love of conjuring and the adventures you've had with that. Setting aside your skeptical and critical thinking outreach, if we get back to the fact that you were for many years
the performing conjurer and escape artist.
Oh, yes. I made a living at it. I barely eked a living at it.
Yeah.
I actually did rather well, traveled all over the world, and the profession was very good to me, and my audiences were very good to me. And what I'm currently involved in, the whole skeptical picture, of course, a professional skeptical picture, I must say, is my way of paying back my audiences for the applause that they gave me and the support that they gave me and the income that they gave me over the years. It's very true.
Yeah,
yes. They supported me, and this is, I feel, a way of giving it back.
Absolutely. And it's one of the great pleasures, I'm sure, that you discover when you travel around the world is other magicians will come and say hello.
Oh, yes.
Again, setting aside other skeptics who are always coming to you, but just getting back to your pure love of the conjuring art. Last night we had a young magician come up.
Yes,
indeed. And he bought one of the James Randi decks.
Oh, yes.
And was shuffling them with one hand, much to my amazement.
Oh, yeah. No, he appears to be very clever with his hands, and I wished I'd had more time to spend with him, because I had a couple of things, little twists that I wanted to explain to him, but he had to hustle away, and we did.
2015 now, in June, episode number 349, and I chat to James Randi about the upcoming TAM 13 in Las Vegas. And I guess this is one of the things I really miss, is my catching up with James Randi to talk about exciting things like TAM. Joining me now all the way from Fort Lauderdale, as he normally does about this time of year, it's the one and only, the amazing James Randi. Hello, Randy.
Speaking. Hello. Good to talk to you again, Richard. As you say, this is our annual get-together on Skype, and I always look forward to it, so ask away.
Oh, well, let me begin right away, Randy. As I mentioned at the top of the show to my listeners, I went under the knife. Oh, yes, I went under the surgeon's knife a couple of days ago here in Australia. But what many people don't know, in the minutes leading up to them wheeling me into the operating room, you were having a quick chat to me, a text chat, and I found that very encouraging. And you were assuring me that modern science knows what it's doing, and you were reminding me of all the various procedures you've had done.
Yes, well, they have been numerous, and medical science triumphed again. Some of my detractors out there don't think it triumphed again. They think it made a mistake. But nonetheless, I'm still here, and I intend to be here for quite some time. I'm 86 now. I always say going on 100 because I'm optimistic and perhaps unrealistic. But I certainly... I'm looking forward, after all, Martin Gardner made it to 97. And, astonishing how we can do these things. I'm looking for an even century, after which I'll relax a bit.
Oh, I see, because I was just about to ask you, now that you're officially retired, what does that mean for the amazing Randy? Does that really mean much at all? How are you enjoying your retirement?
Well, I'm working harder than ever, as a matter of fact, because, first of all, my shortening time on Earth, sure, that's the only place I'm going to spend it, I can assure you. No, I found that the pressure of having to attend almost daily to JREF matters was getting a bit much for me, and my board of governors said that they understood, and they allowed me to resign as the chairman of JREF, the James Randi Educational Foundation, as we all know. And so I'm just the founder. Now, that doesn't mean that I just stumbled over it in my yard or something like that. I started the thing up X number of years ago, and it's been a huge success for me, and I hope for the skeptical community.
2017, in July, on episode number 455, another interview of James Randi talking about his amazing travels.
When you hear it back, it's quite...
Fabulous recording.
It is. I'm backstage here near the green room at Nexus, the Northeast Conference of Science and Skepticism in New York. Wow. With none other than James the Amazing Randi. Randi, it's great to see you. We haven't seen each other for a little while.
Yes, it's been quite a while, and there have been changes in both of our lives, right?
Now, I think the last time I saw you would have been the last Amazing meeting in Las Vegas.
I believe so, yes.
Not last year, but the year before.
Yes.
But before then was our big tour of Australia, which I remember with enormous mixed feelings.
Mixed feelings.
But affection, yeah.
But it was very busy. Very busy. Yeah. It just zipped back and forth. Because Australia is a rather large place.
It is.
And we
as we discovered.
Yes, we found out very easily, yes.
Yeah.
But it was a wonderful tour, though. I was pretty pooped at the end of it, but...
Yes.
Nonetheless, that's fine. I was younger then.
You were.
Yes.
I noticed you were a bit younger back then. No, it was a tiring. Even for me, in my, how old was I? In my late 40s, I was tired.
No, I can't think of the name of the young Asian gentleman who helped us.
Desh?
Yes,
Desh. Yeah,
yes.
Susie and Desh from Think Inc. were our hosts and getting us around the country.
Yes.
And we toured Sydney and Brisbane and Melbourne and Adelaide and Perth.
Oh, yes,
so,
yes.
But it was a marvellous experience. But what a connection you've had to Australia over many decades.
Oh, yes, well, Dick Smith, of course.
Of course,
was one of my major friends there, and I would say that I owe a good deal to Dick because he made a lot of things easier for me and for Davey, my partner.
Mm-hmm. Well, James Randi, so good to see you here in New York, where you used to live, of course, for many years. And folks, James Randi did a performance last night in front of a packed auditorium.
Well, it wasn't a performance. I just did a little talk.
A little talk?
Yeah.
Well, you did the rope trick.
Yeah, well, the rope. I always do the rope trick.
You always do that.
Yeah, just to prove that I still have some skill left, that I can still do a couple of tricks.
It would be disappointing if you didn't do at least one trick. That's what
Very true. Very true.
But I hope you enjoy the rest of the convention.
Thank you so much.
So now we come to the last message Randi ever sent me, which was in May 2018. A well-wishing, a congratulations for episode 500 of the Skeptic Zone. And you can hear that in May 2018, Randi's health was starting to decline as the years caught up.
Hello, my name is James Randi. I want to congratulate my good friend Richard Saunders on over 500 episodes of the Skeptic Zone podcast. I've been on there many times, and over the last 10 years, it's been a good adventure, I must say. Thank you, Richard. We need more of you.
So typical of James Randi. Even though his health was failing, he still made a personal video to send to me. But let's end with another part of the interview from May 2012, episode number 176. One of my favorite interviews with James Randi, where I put the question to him, what is James Randi really like?
I think I'm a kindly guy who tries to help people understand how the real world works. And to my limited ability and such, I have to strain the limits of what I can do. But I do that, and I've written 9 books now, with the 10th one, A Magician in the Laboratory, forming up right now as we speak. It's going to be very satisfying to me if I get my 10th book out. And when I close my eyes, Richard, I'm going to do it with a certain amount of satisfaction. I think I'm simply going to say something like, well, I did the best I could. And that's all a fellow can be asked to do. And my delight at knowing people like you and all the rest, the Sagans and Asimovs and the Smiths and the Philip Adamses too. Oh, yes, what a delight that has been. That has made my life really worthwhile. And that's what James Randi is all about.
James the Amazing Randi. Amazing in so many ways, but folks, he was an amazing friend. time once again to dive into the treasure trove that is Trove at trovenla.gov.au, the online resource of digitized newspapers, gazettes, periodicals, magazines, articles, reports, etc., etc., etc. But this week it's a bit of a combination because I'm also raiding my own personal archive of news clippings which I've collected at the State Library of New South Wales in their microfilm section, going through and looking for articles of interest, well, in this case, of course, to do with James Randi. And what I'll do is concentrate on the year 1980, the year Randi flew out to Australia at the invitation of Dick Smith to help conduct the water divining tests. And a good primer for what I'm about to read out is James Randi in Australia on YouTube, the documentary about the water divining tests. Now, by the time many years ago I got my hands on the original copy, it was being kept by Dick Smith. We sent it to Melbourne, where the only machine in the country existed to transfer the tape. They told us that the tape had degraded and was unusable. Luckily for us, Barry Williams, the late Barry Williams, the former president of the Australian Skeptics, made a videotape recording of the documentary when it was aired, and we were able to use that to put onto a DVD of water divining. Nevertheless, James Randi in Australia on YouTube. It's perfectly viewable, watchable right now. So, we begin with a page from the Sydney Morning Herald, dated the 28th of June, 1980. $30,000 promised for levitation, divination, psychic challenge by Ben Sandilands. Dick Smith, Philip Adams and James Randi, an American magician, will offer next month $30,000 cash to the first person who can demonstrate a paranormal ability. They can levitate, bend spoons or divine for water by any means other than trickery or technology, Mr. Smith said yesterday. The money is being put up for proof of any psychic or paranormal powers. But instead of rushing to put their powers to the test, Australian levitators, water diviners, spoon benders and psychic surgeons are discovering prior commitments which prevent them using their gifts to win the prize. Mr. Smith, Sydney's unconventional electronics businessman, believes this shyness has something to do with Mr. Randi, who will arrive in Sydney on July 28 to perform in Sydney and Melbourne. He can bend spoons, perform psychic surgery, and create all manner of illusions because he's a master magician, but he detests people who claim to be supernatural or psychic when they are only magicians. Mr. Smith and Mr. Adams have both matched James Randi's long-standing reward of $10,000, or so it seems. Mr. Adams said yesterday he had set aside $10,000 in psychic money which would be deposited by thought transference in the account of the successful claimant. A paddock has already been prepared for the test of dowsing or the power of water divining with a forked stick or other object. Pipes made of various materials have been buried in the paddock. The dowsers will be invited to divine which pipes contain flowing water. The team had hoped to find some entrants from the Caulfield Institute of Technology in Melbourne, where researcher Dr. Charles Osborne claims to have discovered inexplicable psychic powers among children and students. The team had hoped to find some entrants from the Caulfield Institute of Technology in Melbourne, where researcher Dr. Charles Osborne claims to have discovered inexplicable psychic powers among children and students. But to their disappointment, Dr. Osborne confirmed yesterday that he had been unavailable to interest any of his 40 subjects in accepting a test of their powers, which include moving toy boats around ponds by thought power. Mr. Smith said Dr. Osborne's astonishing claims had received uncritical coverage in the press, but not even $30,000 could induce one of them to prove their paranormal gifts. He said he had long believed that the public was being intellectually ripped off by UFO reports, pyramidology, astrology, and humbug in general. But he was now prepared to put his money where his mouth was. I'm not closing my mind to the possibility that people possess such powers, but when the claims are dignified by a member of a publicly funded institute of higher education, I think we are all entitled to say, "Show me," Mr. Smith said. James Randi has suggested 11 feats which would win the first person to demonstrate them the prize money for psychic powers. They are: levitate yourself or move a remote object, deform or break a remote object, divine the contents of a sealed envelope, predict an event of sufficient oddity, detect an aura, diagnose an illness remotely, cure an illness by paranormal intervention, divine the presence or nature of a concealed substance, control the actions of a person or a machine, demonstrate out-of-body travel or perception, and perform any other demonstration of paranormal powers without resorting to trickery or technology. And on the page there's a nice publicity photograph of Randi, and underneath it says, James Randi, are the, in quotes, psychics, end quotes, scared of a magician? And the next time we see Randi mentioned in the newspapers comes to us from the Canberra Times, dated the 30th of July, 1980. Diviners miss $40,000. Sydney. No one won a $40,000 challenge to diviners to demonstrate their ability to divine for water, brass, and gold in Sydney yesterday. None of the 10 acceptors could even find a lost brass tuning prong used on one of their divining rods. Sydney businessman Mr. Dick Smith, writer Philip Adams, American magician James Randi, and journalist Richard Carlton had each offered $10,000 to anyone who could repeatedly demonstrate their ability to detect running water under the ground or pick which box contained a lump of brass or gold. Judges were the Reverend Ted Knopfs, director of the Wayside Chapel, Father Laurie Drake, senior lecturer in geophysics at Macquarie University, Mr. Bill Williamson of the New South Wales Resources Commission, and Mr. John Mills, Executive Secretary of the National Water Wells Association. The diviners looking for running water were each given 10 opportunities to walk over a course under which 10 pipes were buried. After each try, the water was channeled into a different pipe, and the diviners had to select which pipe was carrying the water. Others tried to pick which of 10 cardboard boxes had a lump of brass inside. Again, each diviner was given 10 chances to find the correct box. No matter how hard they tried with their forked sticks, metal bars, pieces of wire, or keys dangling from a string, no one proved they could find what they were looking for. After the diviners completed 107 tests, Mr. Smith said the success rate had averaged only 11%, no better than the chance you would get from throwing a dice. And now we come to the Sydney Morning Herald once again on the 17th of August 1980. And in the interim, after the last item we found from a few months earlier, James Randi had appeared on the Don Lane Show, which is a very famous incident where James Randi was kicked off the show after Don Lane lost his temper. But that's possibly a story for another day. The article says, Randi's a wake-up call to the tricks of mediums, with a picture of James Randi with the caption, James Randi, Crusade Against Fakes. James Randi, the magician who made Don Lane disappear, used to be one of the psychic phonies he now debunks. As plain Randall Zwing, which was James Randi's birth name, he had a telepathy act that made him a star. But when distraught parents started pleading with him to find their lost children, he gave it away. I couldn't live with that kind of lie, Randi explained later. So I went back to conjuring rabbits. And he started crusading against the fakes and liars who pose as mediums and faith healers to make fortunes at the expense of human grief. Randy was 15 when he attended his first spiritualist meeting.
I saw all the conjuring tricks magicians use, and I saw little old ladies being taken in by it.
He said,
I thought, one day I'm going to have enough authority to expose these people.
These days, Randy, one of America's top magicians, has that authority. On the Don Lane Show last week, he criticized spoonbender Uri Geller and Doris Stokes, the ubiquitous grandmotherly medium who claims to communicate beyond the grave. Lane, who has several times had Mrs. Stokes on his show, leapt heatedly to her defense. Finally, sweeping Randy's props from a table, Lane told the magician to
piss off.
Then, abracadabra, the comedian stormed off his own show. Challenge. It wasn't exactly the best example of the lanky Yank's wit. And here, of course, they're referring to Don Lane, who was also known at the time as the Lanky Yank, a very popular talk show host in the 1970s, originally from New York, I think. We read on. Indeed, Randy himself tends to be funnier. He has compared Doris Stokes with Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, and the Easter Bunny. And he issued her with a rare challenge, a wrestling match to the death, nude in mud. Not surprisingly, Mrs. Stokes found the offer one she could refuse. More to the point, though, she has also resisted invitations to perform her Calling Up the Dead act under Randy's relentless gaze. Randy was brought to Australia by three well-known skeptics: electronics millionaire Dick Smith, writer Philip Adams, and TV current affairs reporter Richard Carlton. His original brief was to pour cold water on water and metal diviners, which he succeeded in doing without attracting the publicity he had hoped for. Randy and his three backers offered $40,000 for any diviner who could find hidden water, brass and gold. All 10 entrants failed, recording a success rate of just 11%. Yet the tests were virtually unreported in the media. As Randy put it,
if Hitler's alive and well in Argentina, it's a story. If he's dead and gone, no story.
Ben's Spoons. The 52-year-old Canadian-born magician has written 3 books. 2 of them, The Magic of Uri Geller and Flim Flam, The Truth About Unicorns, Parapsychology and Other Delusions, claim to expose the sleights of hand used by those who claim to have supernatural power. One of his other acts is to bend spoons the way Geller did, by illusion, not by the power of mind. He claims his strange encounter with Don Lane was a setup.
Lane's ratings have depended a good deal on people like Doris Stokes. I think she's a favorite of his, and he believed I was attacking her, which she justly deserves to be.
Randy flew back to the United States on Wednesday, still puzzled at the way Australia has taken to Mrs. Stokes. But his experience hasn't affected his sense of humour. Indeed, he spent almost as much time taking the mickey out of his friend Dick Smith. Hearing of the eccentric millionaire's plans to retrace Scott's path across the Antarctic, Randy asked Smith,
"Will you drop electric toilet seats to them?"
And seeing Smith having his photo taken again, Randy noted dryly,
"Dick gets his tan from strobes and flashlights."
And now we come to the Sydney Morning Herald on the 11th of October 1980. So we're moving on through the year, and a relatively quick turnaround. This is a preview of the documentary which was filmed on the water divining tests. Taking the mystique out of the magical. James Randi in Australia. ATN7, and that was the TV network. It still is. Wednesday, 8 p.m. Previewed by Gary Shelley. James Randi, a psychic investigator from New York, does not believe in Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, or the Easter Bunny.
There's not enough evidence to support their existence,
says the magician, who is not entirely humorless. Mr. Randi scoffs at any form of paranormal behavior, from the bending of spoons to the searching for water by divining rod. He wants to
expose people who go out of their way to defraud others.
At the same time, he would love to believe that these people could prove their supernatural powers scientifically. The name James Randi might ring a bell to many viewers. He was the gentleman whom Don Lane told to get lost, in a liquefied form, when he exposed Uri Geller and Doris Stokes as frauds, live. Mr. Randi was brought to Australia by Dick Smith in an attempt to prove or disprove the validity of water diviners and psychic surgeons. In the program, the investigator explains the skullduggery and chicanery exercised by the psychic surgeons in the Philippines, whose hands fumble in and out of the stomachs of patients who pay thousands of dollars for treatment. It is not a pretty sight, as Randi demonstrates on a bewildered human guinea pig. With sleight of hand, he appears to draw out pieces of the man's innards, but they are only a handful of chicken livers. Water diviners also bear the brunt of Mr. Randi's exposé. He conducts some experiments to test their extraordinary gift, with a reward of $30,000 for any person who can scientifically prove their powers. Each water diviner claimed to have had unlimited success in the craft, and many make a good living from the man on the land. One codger was certain the test would be
easier than getting in and out of bed.
The experiment, arranged in true show business fashion, had the Reverend Ted Noffs and a priest, Father Drake, as official judges. However, God was not on the side of James Randi and Dick Smith, because both religious men actually believe in water divining. As well as divining for water, tests were made in the search for brass and gold objects. Out of 111 attempts, only 15 were successful, an average of 11%. But not one merited the prize, which is still up for grabs. And as an aside, I'm a little surprised that they actually gave away the results in the review, the preview here. Oh well. We read on. James Randi is convinced that the movement of the divining or dowsing rod is manipulated by the imagination or wishful thinking of the person operating it.
There is an enormous amount of harm in deception,
he said. He gave, as an example, the Jamestown massacre in Guyana. There, the total belief in one man, whose charisma and power was so overwhelming, meant that death was the only salvation. Which, I am sure, is more than James Randi can say for Don Lane. And finally we come to the Sydney Morning Herald once more on the 9th of November 1980. And again we have a publicity photograph of Randi. James Randi, he can't cop ESP. When seeing isn't believing. Don Lane and believers in divining rods, spoon bending and psychic surgery should watch the special James Randi in Australia.
Paranormal nonsense, claptrap and flummery,
says Mr. Randi, as he convincingly demonstrates how easily people can fool the more gullible among us and themselves. Mr. Lane should watch Channel 7 at 7:30 on Wednesday night to hear the cognate arguments he would not allow Mr. Randi to expound on his show. Devotees of the Lane program will recall the evening the compere had the ill grace to swear at his guest and storm off the set after Randi had raised doubts about Doris Stokes, whom he calls
the granny who hears dead people talking to her.
In a statement issued through his Australian sponsor, Dick Smith, the scientist says he's certain Lane's actions were
calculated setup.
Randi does not believe in Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy for the same reason he can't cop ESP, spoon bending, and the rest. Insufficient evidence. His evidence, in his doubting Thomas view, places all things paranormal firmly in the Easter Bunny class. It would be a pity if he lost most of his viewers in the first few minutes as he appears to remove a quantity of blood and guts from a willing victim's stomach. It isn't psychic surgery, but sleight of hand. By a similar trick, he bends spoons in the slickest, faster-than-the-eye Uri Geller fashion. The clincher takes place in a field in Ryde, where the reputations of a group of water diviners are left looking a little tattered. Attracted by an offer of $40,000, $10,000 each from skeptics Randy, Smith, Philip Adams and Richard Carlton, the dowsers had to identify gold and brass hidden in cardboard boxes and which out of 10 pipes had water flowing through it. Before the experiment, most said they would be 100% successful. 5 agreed to split the proceeds, they were so confident. In this case, seeing is disbelieving. The results are no better than chance or guesswork, and Randy declares,
"It would seem to indicate that dowsing as a force does not exist."
Does this shake the faith of our dowsers? Not a bit. They come up with every excuse under the sun, including sunspots, to explain away this rare lapse.
People,
Randy concludes sadly,
simply will not learn a lesson.
And that was a report by Don Groves. So there we are, some newspaper reports from 1980, centering on James Randi's visit and his taking part in the famous water divining tests. I will link to James Randi in Australia in the show notes, and I think it's a classic of skepticism, and it's certainly a very early introduction to me to the world of testing the paranormal. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and thank you once again to James Randi for being so generous with your time over the years for interviews and such like. And I've noticed on YouTube especially, there are lots of people posting up lectures and talks and interviews with James Randi, just like I am. And that's a wealth of information. In fact, I watched a lecture just the other night, an hour and a half of Randi when he was about 62, 63. And he was in fine form, quick-witted, sharp, telling us about tests with water divining and homeopathy and psychics and everything like that. Lots of good talks on YouTube with James Randi. Thank you to those people who continue to support the Skeptic Zone at skepticzone.tv with Patreon or PayPal. Always necessary, and this year it's been more necessary than ever. Which is ridiculous, because necessary is a superlative. I'll try it again. Always vital, but this year more vital than ever. No, that doesn't work. Always crucial, but this year more... You know what I mean. You know what I mean. Thank you very much. Coming up on next week's show, I'm going to cover news about the Vaxxed bus. It really is a vexed bus. They've been vexed because local councils up and down the state of New South Wales have said no to the Vexed bus, much to the chagrin of the conspiracy theorists running around the country in their big black bus. Good to see that people in local councils are stepping up to fight this nonsense and conspiracy theory mongering. Also on next week's show, more logical fallacies with Michelle Bickersma. Hello, Michelle. And the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham. And the last thought I will leave you with today is I noticed there was a posting on James Randi's Facebook page just in the last few days by his partner Devi with a simple message, and that was, for my friends in the United States, vote. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.